I did a big research project while I was still at Google about transformation, the big T word. And what I was looking for actually was leaders and employees who were able to transform themselves and transform their mindset really effectively, and what they did. And surprisingly to me, when I interviewed, I did a qualitative study, when I interviewed a lot of people who were great at being agile and innovative, what I found was the corollary for them to not get burnt out was that they had a lot of stability practices. And they would not sacrifice their stability practices. So I had one leader say to me, I always have dinner with my family at 6 p.m. and that's a non-negotiable. Because what that does is that resets myself. And that to me creates stability in my life, something that I know will always be there inside of the context of all of this change, whether this change is self-imposed or organizationally imposed. And that was really eye-opening to me because from a psychological standpoint, human beings can only handle so much uncertainty, or otherwise we're pushed into fight or flight. That's a biological response. So it now, in retrospect, I think it makes good sense that you continuously have to build in stability practices if you're asking people to be innovative. So you can't just be full on all the time inside uncertainty and novelty. It can be really fun, but it's only fun if you also have some stable ground to go back to. So organizations can do this, but individuals also can do this for themselves. So I encourage it at both levels.
And so how would this look like practically at the organizational level? I think you gave a great example personally. I'd say, okay, I'm not going to miss my morning workout and I'm not going to miss dinner with my family. Everything else, I'm pretty flexible, but those two things have to stay.
That's right.
So what about, how can, if I'm a leader of a team, how can I try to help team members have that same type of stability, whether it be at work or away from work?
So I think my manager did a great job when I asked to take a big innovative risk and leave my day job. And I said, I need 6 months. And she said, okay, 6 months. So for me, that was stable ground because I knew within that 6 months, I had the room and she was going to have my back for 6 months. It wasn't like she was going to be coming 1 month in and saying, what are you doing? Have you made an innovative breakthrough?
Right.
I knew the time span that I had. And I also knew in that context what accountability was going to look like, and also practically how this was going to impact my performance review. We had all those conversations ahead of time so that I could create the conditions to just only be concerned about the innovation. And that stable ground for me was knowing that she was going to hold that steady for me and go. And if anyone else was knocking on the door and saying, why isn't Ciela in her day job? She was going to say, because it's 6 months.
And so maybe if we have a team where we're not able to give somebody 6 months to work on a project, we might be able to build something in where they like 3 days a week. We say, look,
that's right.
I would like you to put time on your calendar where you're not executing on any tasks. I would just like you to go for a walk and just think about what you're interested in as it relates to things we're working on. And then letting people know, like, hey, that space, like you can feel free to turn down meetings if they're in that time. That's your time. That's kind of
right.
What you're pointing
so
to?
That's sort of at the individual manager level, and every manager is responsible for creating the conditions inside their organization. And so that's a great example of how an individual manager can do that. At the organizational level, the best mechanisms are the same mechanisms we use to reinforce other things like high productivity. We use accountability measures. So how are you giving grace inside of the standard processes that every organization tends to run, which is things like performance reviews? And so some organizations that are quite innovative, they're really interested in how much innovation you're bringing to the table, and then you get held accountable to that. So a great example of this is X, the Moonshot Factory. They measure you on how many failed ideas you have. And the more, the better.
Right. So they're
because what they're
actively
trying to get
encouraging
is
failure.
innovation.
Right.
They're trying to get ideas into the system, and so there's no perfect idea. So as long as you're generating ideas, then you're going to meet the metric for what success looks like.
And I'm sure they have some standards about like, look at a certain number of failed experiments, given that it's a well-run experiment, right? Like you have to have these factors built into the experiment. So it's not just like, oh, I had 100 failed experiments, but they were all junk. They have to be well set up, right? But the
Yeah,
more that well-run experiments that you can fail at, the better,
the
right?
better. Absolutely. And
Fantastic.
failure is like celebrated. And I know we talk about that all the time about failure being celebrated. And very rarely do I see an organization that does that well.
Right.
But I think it's worth us considering, like, what do we, when it comes down to it, how is our organization really accepting or not accepting failure?